We are focusing now on trying to deliver what the two presidents, President Trump and President Juncker of the European Commission, agreed to do this summer when they met in the White House to try to identify a positive trade agenda. And today we have focused mainly to discuss different sectors where we can facilitate regulatory cooperation, standards, conformity assessment, things that would be beneficial for the American economy and for the European economy, facilitate for our exporters and take away some red tape.
I see here headlines that you discussed soybeans, natural gas, regulatory cooperation. Did you talk about auto tariffs at all?
Well, I put the question on where they are in the process, but obviously no decision has been made yet. We think that would be deeply unjustified if we were to be target of these measures, and we work under the assumption that as long as we have these talks, that will not happen. But we didn't go into detail. But we did also talk about soybeans and LNG. There is a big interest among some of the member states of the European Union to buy LNG from the US. And we are looking at see if these procedures, the authorization and the certification can be facilitated so that that can happen. That's, of course, huge investments, not happening tomorrow, but many countries would like to engage in that kind of trade.
Commissioner, I know there's been this talk of the threat of the U.S. putting auto tariffs on imports into this country, including from Europe, but there are still the tariffs that the EU puts onto American-made vehicles coming into that market. Was there any kind of discussion about those, or about, say, the tariffs that are now in place on Harley-Davidson motorcycles? I mean, there are quite a number of tariffs already in place on both sides that I would imagine quite a number of companies and consumers would like to see resolved.
Well, so would we. The tariffs that we put on, you mentioned Harley-Davidson and a few other products, were the results of the tariffs on 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium. So these were sort of retaliatory measures by the European Union. We are ready to take them away the same day as the US would take away their tariffs on steel and aluminium, which we also consider as not justified. And should the US, which we certainly hope will not happen, also impose tariffs on cars and car parts, we would, likewise, we would retaliate on a number of products. We are in the preparatory phase of having such a list if it would be needed. But again, I really hope that we can concentrate on a positive agenda. We have so much to gain from working together and identifying, challenges in the world, reforming the WTO, working to assess some of the methods used by China that we both think are not legitimate, instead of trying to make life difficult for our companies.
Do you therefore support the US's tough stance on trade with China? Are the EU and the US closer to working together on that front?
Well, we very much share the criticism that US has voiced, and we have done the same when it comes to China as a country with massive subsidies to state-owned companies, with forced technology transfer, cyber thefts and so on. And we are working with the US and Japan actually in a working group trying to address these issues within the WTO, because we think that that is the forum where we need to address it, the multilateral forum, to rewrite and update some of the WTO rules. And here we have good progress. We met several times on a ministerial level, and that work is going forward, I would say.
You mentioned soybeans, Commissioner. Is agriculture more broadly on the table as a discussion point for the EU to reduce some of the state subsidies on that sector?
Well, I think the US have quite a lot of state subsidies in agriculture as well. But we have said that we are ready to engage in a smaller trade agreement focused on industrial goods, and that would not cover agriculture.
What about this EU digital tax that is getting a lot of attention, what some folks are referring to as the GAFA tax, the Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple tax? Did that come up in discussion? It seems to me that there could be a lot of tension around this if this proposal is put into place in Europe.
Well, these proposals are certainly not directed against the US. They are totally non-discriminatory. It's a digital tax that is being discussed within the European Union. But we didn't talk about that at all today, no.
I wanted to ask Trade Commissioner about the latest headlines on Brexit. Theresa May seemingly getting full support from her cabinet for the withdrawal agreement that she'd negotiated with Michel Barnier. Do you think that now will get approval on the EU side from all 27 states?
Well, I certainly hope so. We're very sad that the Brits are leaving us, but if this is the beginning of the end of that procedure with the withdrawal agreement, and then we will have to discuss the future relationship. I guess there will be a meeting between the heads of states of the European Union and Mrs May to discuss all this in the coming weeks. And if she got the government in the UK with her, that's certainly a positive development. So we will make sure that we have an agreement as soon as possible, and that we also start to think about the life after and our future relations. So it's an important step forward.
The UK hopes to strike a trade deal with the US after Brexit. From your discussions today with US trade representatives, do you think that's an easy task?
Well, it's not for me to judge. Obviously, when the UK is leaving the European Union, they will have to leave all the trade agreements with that exists currently, and also negotiate with new partners. And I can imagine that for them it's a priority with the US, but that is absolutely not for me to intervene on. That will be between Washington and London to discuss.
Commissioner, can you give us any kind of sense of when we could see some of these, I guess, smaller deals between Europe and the US I guess, become official, be it LNG, be it soybeans, some of the other areas where there seems to be a growing, similarity between the two countries, especially given the fact that it seems like it would take years to actually negotiate a comprehensive trade deal, and that doesn't seem to be something that's been green-lit by all the European Union members yet.
No, I think some of the things we discuss when it comes to regulatory cooperation on standards and so on, we don't have a formal deadline, and I don't want to give you a date, but we are working very swiftly now in order to see what can be short-term deliverables that could, you could see decisions already maybe beginning of next year. But then there will be other things where we need to put processes in motion that will be slightly longer. A trade agreement limited on industrial goods could be quite quick to negotiate, I would say, but we need to agree on the parameters first, and then as I understood, the US have just initiated a process here with the Congress to ask for the Trade Promotion Authority, and that has its own process, so we will have to wait until that is over before we can actually identify the framework of such an agreement, what we call a scoping agreement, and then I will have to get a mandate for that as well. But I think it can be a quite quick process, but we need now to wait for the procedure in the Congress, if we agree on the parameters, of course.
And Trade Commissioner, just to sum things up, how would you describe the overall tone of your meeting and of the US administration, their approach towards trade? There's been ups and downs in the relationship on this front. Where is it at the moment? Is it much improved than it was 6 months ago, for example?
Well, we still are very critical about these tariffs on steel and aluminium that we are facing. It is hurting our companies, and we have been extremely clear that we don't think that car tariffs would be good neither for Europe or for the US. It would also affect American jobs. So that we are very clear about. But we have a positive agenda that we're trying to work, and I would say that the atmosphere between myself and Ambassador Lighthizer is very constructive, very friendly. We met several times, we know each other well by now, and we're trying to make the best of this as it is.